This channel is supported by TrueFire. TrueFire is an online library of lessons from some of my favourite players. There's thousands of lessons on there. You can use the promo code JNC40 to get 40% off of any of their courses. First thing to start this video by saying is that I think there are great Fender guitars being made at almost every price point. So like a Fender player, pretty affordable. I bought two of those this year. I had a Fender Strat Player 2 and the Tele Player 2. I think I preferred the Strat. It had a bit of a flaw with the neck finishing. Then I bought the Tele, which actually didn't have any flaws with it, but as time went on, I kind of started to think, actually, this is not really doing it for me. So there wasn't anything necessarily wrong with the guitar, but for whatever reason, colour looked amazing, but when I played it, it didn't speak to me as much as some of my other guitars. But that is kind of the main thing I wanted to say first, is that there's great Fender guitars being made across the range. This video is about alternatives to a Fender Stratocaster, and I think there are a few that I wanted to mention. Feel free to drop your favourites in the comments. Mostly what I'm focusing on in this video is guitars that are actually a little bit closer in terms of spec to an older Fender guitar. Now there are some guitars like Sire's which I kind of categorize as a little bit more of a super Strat type of vibe, where, you know, you might have an HSS arrangement on there, you might have, you know, some locking tuners, you might have a slightly flatter radius. For me, what I'm looking for in some cases with a Strat is something which is a little bit closer to those 50s and 60s spec Strats. So that's kind of my personal bias in this video. So first things first, I think in the UK it's super possible to get a PRS Silver Sky SE for about £599 brand new quite a lot of the time, and I think some of their newer colours on those look really classy. The one thing for me which I tend to, I don't know, this might be like superstition and stuff, but go for the 6-screw type trem, whereas both the Sires and the Silver Sky have a 2-point. Not that I'm using the trems on the Strat much at all anyway, but in terms of something that would be, for me, a bias as well that I'd have. But the Silver Sky SE, in terms of bang for buck, it gets some things really right. So that radius, I think, is like 8 inches-ish, which is a little bit flatter than a true vintage 7.25, but not much. And I really appreciate that. I think that's part of what I like about a Strat feel in some ways, is that radius, which kind of does encourage bends, to me, way more than a flatter radius. A neck is super comfortable as well, whereas some of the sort of classic players and stuff around that price range start to go towards like a more of a slim C type neck. So I appreciate that on the PRS SE you've got a slightly thicker neck. So that's kind of my first tier, like at the budget end. Also worth mentioning Jet guitars here. There's a black Strat version that they make. I think that's a really good guitar for the money as well. So if you're not familiar with Jet guitars, check those out. I've got a demo with a Jet coming up soon. And also, if you're looking for more modern stuff, then a Sire, I would definitely say, is certainly up there with PRS SE quality as well. But as I say, slightly less vintage in terms of spec. And both the Silver Sky SE and the Sires tend to sound a little bit more. Then, in the mid-range, Tokai have been, I think, a pretty key player in terms of affordable Fender-type guitars for, well, and Gibson, but for a long time. I think they've got a really decent heritage of actually building these guitars. They're still going. You don't necessarily hear Tokai too much. In the UK, Rose Morris, my buddy Mike at Rose Morris, sent this one over for me to check out. I'm not being paid by them, but he's a friend, and I'm always appreciative of checking out a Tokai. And this one will be going back to him. I think they have 3 of these in stock with the matching headstock. You can use a code to get 10% off if you're interested in one of these. But these have a 7.25 inch radius. They have a bone nut, a very white bone nut. The cow must have drunk a lot of milk. And yeah, this one is really lightweight as well, which is nice. And it's kind of got, I think, a lot of the things that you'd like. So it's got the right headstock. It's got the right radius. 6-point trem. The Japanese are pretty precise in their building. And I think it actually sounds pretty Stratty, which sounds silly, but it's one of those things that some Strat type guitars actually, if you're interested in kind of the the more vintagey guitar stuff, I think Tokai is also not a terrible bet there in terms of being able to get a pretty affordable old guitar that was made well in like the 80s. I had a 1984 Gold Star Sound. They do feel pretty good. I think the Tokai springy sound is maybe like the tip of their range, but older and newer Tokais I've found to be pretty consistent and look the part, of course, and also sound really good and are well made and all of that sort of stuff. So, you know, this isn't like a light rosewood fretboard. It's got a really comfortable feeling neck, sort of like 60s profile, I think. Oh, and they come with a really decent hard case as well, if you're looking for that sort of thing. So Tokais, I think, are pretty good, affordable, just over £1,000. I think that's a really decent price that you pay for a really good Strat for the money. You can't do much better than that for that kind of money. This next one is sacrilege at its finest, but the reason that I picked the PRS Silver Sky, I spoke to John at Peach Guitars about this. He really raves about these as well. He's a guy who's got a vintage Strat, I believe. The thing about them is that no, they're not going to look right, and no, they're not going to appease like some of the purists, but the neck shape is beautiful, based on like a 60s neck style. The pickups, for me, are a little bit more hyped than like a 50s Strat. I think they're based on 60s style, so they're a bit hotter, a bit more scooped maybe. But you've got the right radius, the very wrong headstock, but also they seem to care about making them lightweight, and so that's why for me the Silver Sky, I think, is priced really competitively for the quality that you get, in my opinion. Now, let other folks know if you've had the opposite experience in the comments. But I think people are sort of coming around to the idea of the Silver Sky as something of a workhorse and something that's maybe approaching that kind of Fender custom shop quality without quite the same price tag. So in the UK, you can often find them for £2,000 brand new, which for an American-made bolt-on guitar that is lightweight and well made, sounds good, plays good, I think that's a pretty good deal. Fender custom shops now creeping around 3.5, 4K quite often in the UK. So that's kind of the context for this. Does it sound exactly like a Strat? You could decide. And I think, actually, I've gigged this one a couple of times, really slinky feel to it, nice frets, slightly bigger on this one. This is a 2021, but perfect neck shape, 7.25 inch radius, lightweight guitar, and that's fantastic. And so those are kind of my choices. Of course, you see me playing in basically every video. A K-Line Stratocaster. Now, K-Line are based in Missouri in the US, and I think kind of a good example of like boutique Strat builders, which I think is still quite a sensible option if you're out there looking for one. So maybe like, yeah, consider whether that's the sort of thing that might work for you too. I think there are some reasons that a boutique build might get you some specs which are more suited to you, and yeah, that's just an option out there as well. So K-Line, I think, make fantastic guitars, but there's loads of other great boutique builders as well. Grosh, the Danocaster, do they still do stuff? In the UK, there's a brand called Atkin Guitars, which are fairly new, which people seem to really like too. But there's some other options as well. And of course, Fender make great guitars. So let me know in the comments if you've got other favourites. I think ESP used to do some Japanese copies of Strats, which are pretty well regarded. So yeah, feel free to share yours as well. Those are some of my choices.